Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen the birth of a terrifying, otherworldly queen, the demise of Nimrod and Orcus, and that the dream of the 90s is alive at Image Comics. But we're going to kick things off this week with Blood Hunt number 2, written by Jed MacKay with artwork by Pepe Larraz. So this book sees of the Avengers kind of, gain their footing back, and they start to take the battle back to the vampires that are assaulting New York City and potentially the world. This is, I think, a better issue than what we've seen in issue number 1. At least we've kind of established, who the players are and what we're dealing with. And while that still kind of feels a little bit off kilter, this was an entertaining issue. Pepe Larraz does what Pepe Larraz does, right? Like you expect a certain quality when his name is attached to a book, and he delivers like through and through on this. In fact, I would go as far to say that he does things with his digital artwork that quite frankly shouldn't work, and like really usually don't hit the same way that I would expect them to hit in the digital landscape. When I see things like Zipatone being used digitally and manipulated, usually it turns me off a little bit, but man, he's doing some things in this book that they just blow my mind. I don't know how he's accomplishing it, how he's doing it, but I'm here for it, and I definitely want to see more of it. The other thing too, and I gotta shout out Stu from Dr. Doom's fan club for saying this because I agree with him wholeheartedly. How is this the best issue of Avengers that Jed MacKay's written when he's already like, whatever, double digits issues deep into the run of that actual title itself? Um, it just feels really weird. That's not to say that this is a great, well written issue. It's perfectly fine. It's entertaining. It's an event book, so it's like a popcorn kind of book. But again, I guess I'll give kudos where kudos are due. Jed MacKay delivers something that was entertaining here. I just wish that his team book specifically would deliver on that same promise that we've seen here. So, Blood Hunt number 2. What did you think? Okay, looks like we're sticking with event books here. We're going to jump right into The Fall of the House of X, number 5, written by Jerry Duggan with artwork by Lucas Warnock. We're done. Krakoa is over here. And the culmination, I gotta say, kind of ended with, I don't know, a whimper a little bit. I don't understand where this book was going here. And there was a companion piece book, and I understand that these two storylines with the fall of the House of X and the rise of the powers of 10 here are kind of, they're running on parallel tracks going towards the same end game. One feels like a Michael Bay movie, though, where there's not a lot of sense and there's a lot of explosions, and one feels like a Ridley Scott movie where it's a little bit more thought provoking, and it delivers on some of the spectacle, but it leaves you asking questions here, and it leaves you with something that that you think about. A little bit is left on the palate there. This I just don't get it. If this is truly how Nimrod and Orcus were going to be defeated, why the heck didn't they do that 2 years ago? When Hickman left the book, because all that this has done has kind of been sputtering. The artwork is good. I was wholly entertained by it. I think that the character designs, they fit well. There was a lot of good action set pieces. I'm having a hard time understanding why the heck this is how things ended here. So half of the story is done. We need to see what happens with Rise of the Powers of X now. I feel like that's going to be where things truly wrap up and where we can kind of, wave goodbye to the Krakoan age of X-Men here. And hopefully, I have a feeling that that's going to deliver a little bit harder than this one did. All right, next up, we're going to talk about John Constantine Hellblazer, Dead in America, number 5. Written by Cy Spurrier and Aaron Campbell primarily, but this is an anthology issue, so there's, a couple different creative teams that are associated to this. One being Aaron Campbell, the artist, actually taking on writing duties. So this sees a couple different things going on here. It kind of feels like almost like like back in the days with X-Files, it was kind of like one of those monster of the week episodes. It kind of feels like they took 3 of those things and just kind of smashed them into one issue. And I'm kind of left feeling like I'm entertained by it, but also coming off of the highs of the previous issue of this, I kind of felt let down a little bit, man, because I was so ready to continue the pace of the story and find out what the next revelation was going to be. But also, in the same vein, this whole series has felt episodic. So maybe this just fits the bill. I think this is going to be one of those pivot point issues that we look back on and we either say, ooh, that's where the series took off, or ooh, that sputtered a little bit, but maybe hopefully, picked up the pace again after the fact. The differing creative teams were super fun. I felt like that everyone felt like they were staying consistent to the character of John Constantine, and it felt very much in character for what we would expect him to do and some of the challenges that he would take on. So it was entertaining. It was a fun filler issue. I just maybe, like I said, maybe my expectations were a little bit too high, but I'm kind of curious. If you read this, let me know what you were thinking. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Immortal Thor number 11, written by Al Ewing with artwork by Valentino Pinti. So this issue is all kind of revolving around the offspring of Odin. They've all gathered for the first time in centuries, millennia, who knows how long here. But what they're trying to do is they're gathering their forces here to actually find one of the other offsprings, potentially one of the first offsprings of Odin here. It's an interesting notion. I feel like Al Ewing is playing with a couple different things with his writing, and he does this. He's kind of known for this more often than not. This issue feels like that action montage from a movie where everyone's getting their gear ready and they're getting the team ready and they're getting ready to go on the adventure, but it's like right before that adventure happens. The difference, though, is that this is Ewing's take on that, and if you know Ewing, that's gonna deliver a little bit differently, possibly with heavy narration. That's not to say that I'm not here for it. I totally enjoyed it. It was a great read. I really liked seeing how he's playing with mythology, and it's not just Norse mythology, because obviously we know that Thor is heavily involved with that. Same thing with the offspring of Odin and Odin himself. It delivers on Balder the Great and all the other kind of siblings. But it also pulls Angela into the mix, and I'm definitely here for that. As a kid of the '90s, I kind of love Angela being pulled back into the fray. I feel like there needs to be more involvement from her now that she is a character owned by Marvel. I think that's going to be super entertaining. Again, this issue is all about kind of the build up, the build up, the build up. Now it's time to kick this next story arc into full gear. This feels like a pivot point in the story. We had a lot of fun with everything else that was building up here. Now it's time to kind of maybe take a little side quest. Let's look at the B plot for a little bit before we circle back around. So I was totally entertained by this. I feel like it was just a different tone than I was ready for, but I dug it. What did you think? We have a new number one at Marvel with Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider number one, written by Stephanie Phillips with artwork by Federica Mancini. I kind of picked this up on a whim. It's a new number one, and to be quite honest with you, I'm not really heavily involved in the world of Spider-Gwen. I have my knowledge basically almost exclusively comes from the Spider-Verse movies. But that's not to say I haven't dove back in a little bit with like the Jason Latour origination of the character of Spider-Gwen. So I know bits and pieces, but I figured, hey, let's dive in, let's see what this is all about. Especially considering there's a Jenny Frison variant, I kind of figured, what the heck. This did a fairly decent job at catching you up. I didn't feel like I was lost in the series. This kind of picks up, and we see that the TVA has brought Gwen over to the 616 universe. So she's living in, essentially Marvel Prime, with the caveat being that superheroics, that's done. You're not suiting up, you're not going to go, fight crime, you're not going to do any of the things that you're used to. But we all know that that wouldn't make an entertaining comic. So she gets into her mischief, she fights the crime, she puts on the suit for sure. It was an okay issue. I didn't feel lost. I kind of liked some of the character beats that they came across. It's something that definitely I can see building into an entertaining series. However, it just didn't leave me with a hook, right? It gave a lot of promise in the very beginning and it caught me up on things, but there was no hook at the end where I was like, oh man, this is the series that I'm definitely going to be invested in. Again, a lot of potential there. Now, one of the books I talked about previously with Pepe Larraz on the artwork, I talked about how he was doing things digitally that, man, like just, I can't imagine I enjoyed it. It shouldn't work, but it did. That same approach is used here, and I gotta say, it pulled me right out of the issue. Just simple artistic tactics that were done digitally, and I'm not sure who I should necessarily I don't want to say point the blame at, but who I should talk about with this, whether it be the artist, the colorist, the inker. But there are approaches taken specifically on Gwen's suit where there's like this digital halftone that's used, on the creases and on like the elbows and the knees when she's bending. And man, it just looks a little garish if I'm being honest with you. The artwork is great. I feel like the posing, the panel work, the pacing, everything's there, right? But there's that one thing that I'm just like, ooh, that's I don't know if I dig that too much. All in all, it was a decent issue though. I think it was worthwhile to take a chance on. And it could be something that builds here. But let me know. Did you read it? All right, staying in the world of superheroics, we're going to jump over to DC here and start talking about Superman number 14, written by Joshua Williamson with artwork by Rafa Sandoval. Man, I'm loving everything House of Brainiac. Each issue has just built and built and built, and it's just like it's delivering this just epic story that I'm here for. Like everything is feeling so entertaining in that comic booky way that sometimes we just don't get in the world of comic books, to be quite honest. Sometimes people are trying to be something other than comics, and sometimes people are, pitching stories, with the intention to be a movie. This is a comic book, and I'm totally here for it. Um, in this issue, we kind of see Lobo and Clark are duking it out, and Clark eventually, succumbs to the beating, and he's turned over to Brainiac. Brainiac finally kind of reveals his grand master plan. And this is kind of the thing I don't want to say I was complaining about previously, but I was just ready for it in the previous issue. Um, but now that it's been delivered and now that we see the culmination of Brainiac's plan and his new queen rising, it was absolutely terrifying and awesome. The artwork is stunning. It is so cool. I mean, it just there's some of the tactics that he uses here that just make the issue so much more action packed and like so much more visceral. You feel the punches, you hear the punches. It just becomes like this sensory experience that again we just don't see in a lot of comics. That's what makes this the comic booky comic of the week. And it was just so cool. I'm just definitely here for it. Joshua Williamson is pacing this storyline out perfectly. The combination of him and Sandoval being that they like are just the team that is taking this from start to finish, it feels like, with this being intertwined with Action Comics. I think it's just awesome. I love what DC's doing with this book, and it's like it's hitting top tier marks every single week, and I'm just excited to see where this continues to go. Hey, remember all those books that came out in the 90s that the founders of Image Comics put out? Yeah, I do too, and I kind of loved them. So let's talk about Blood Squad 7 number 1, written by Joe Casey with artwork by Paul Fry. This just like delivers on all of the excess and the violence and the bravado of all of those 90s Image Comics. In such a fantastic way. This totally shocked me. I figured I was going to give this a shot, being that it's another new number 1, and I wanted to see what Joe Casey was up to because he is just such an entertaining writer in such a weird, I don't know, unique way. He's kind of like almost like the Hunter S. Thompson of comic book writers. He has this gonzo approach like to every single project he's associated with, and I'm here for it. It's totally cool. So this sees kind of like a new team of superheroes taking up the mantle of kind of like this anagram of what Youngblood was, since Youngblood cannot be used by Image anymore, since they're not the rights of that team is aren't retained by Liefeld anymore. But this kind of picks up on the promise of that team and kind of shows that world of the 90s Image Comics in a modern day setting. um, Joe Casey just does some really cool things in this. Definitely taking his meta pokes and jabs at kind of everything about 90s comics, but also about like just the landscape of everything, the celebrity of the characters themselves, how they pivot into being manufactured into a toy. It's just really cool. Kind of he takes a really fun approach with it, right? I think there's a lot of love and care behind the messaging that he has, but it's also kind of like it comes with a little barb to it. um I'm totally there for it. It's cool. Paul Fry, I've never seen his work before, but I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised. in the moments where it is a team-centric part of the story where there's a fight and they're battling this army, man, it's brutal, it's violent, it's bloody, it's action-packed. You know, when characters are flying, you feel that they're, the wind flying through their hair. But also like I don't know, like there's like vibes of like early Stuart Eminem work in his approach that makes me really, really excited to see where this guy goes. I want to see how he develops and grows and like brings on these new artistic qualities here because I feel like he can develop into this like really, really fantastic artist. The other aspect of this kind of comes by way of the governmental aspects of the team, right? The background people kind of talking about the team and kind of the history of the team and where they've gone and how they're controlling them. And in that same way, it kind of felt almost, and again, this might be the Stuart Eminem influence, but yeah, it kind of felt like next wavy to me. I don't know. This book, like I said, it just totally took me by surprise. It was fun. It was full of excess, and being a kid of the '90s, I was totally there for it. All right, totally pivoting to a different style book. Let's talk about Man's Best #3, written by Pornsak Pinchot with artwork by Jesse Lonergan. So this series has been really interesting. It was kind of billed as Homeward Bound in Space, and I feel like that's mostly accurate, but I feel like this series is doing a little bit more and a little bit less. This issue in particular has taken a totally wild approach, right? This was a trippy issue. So the three animals that we've come to know and love, they're kind of split up. The trio is kind of split up between one of the dogs that's injured and then the dog and cat together, who kind of need to figure out what their master plan is going to be. They basically need to enact, two rescue missions at once. But in doing so, they start speaking with sentient ice, which kind of puts them on this real heady mushroom trip kind of thing. I don't know. It was crazy, but what I really appreciate is that it offered the opportunity for Jesse Lonergan to do a lot of innovative, fantastic things. If you've seen his work previously, you might have seen Hedra, one of his one-shot issues that he came out from Image maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. And there's a lot of fun, interesting panel work that he does. I feel like he appreciates the medium of comic books and he tries to use some of the preconceived notions and really flip them on their head. And he's doing a lot with that here. With those trippy, heady aspects, man, the visuals get wild. There is some truly surreal things that are going on within, the minds of these animals. In the same vein, there's real trippy things that are going on for us as viewers of the comic, where the panel work itself is kind of being devolved and like worked into the actual visuals of the comic themselves. And it's, a panel doesn't become necessarily a panel, it becomes part of the piece of artwork that is within the actual manifestation of the dog's psyche, right? That sounds crazy, right? Because it sounded crazy as I was saying it. I was totally here for it though. It was really cool. My only critique of this series is that through pages 1 through 21, it kind of feels sputtery. It's like, okay, we're going through the paces, but man, every single issue has delivered this cliffhanger when I'm like, oh man, I totally gotta find out what happens with this next issue because maybe I'm more invested than I even thought that I was because I'm truly like I'm here for it. I want to see what happens with these animals. I'm behind them, and now seeing some of the maybe heartbreak that we're gonna see next. Oh man, I'm really interested to see what this means for their characters and their character development. All right, jumping into the world of Ghost Machine, let's talk Rook Exodus #2, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Jason Fabok. This issue was really, really fun, just like all of the Ghost Machine issues have been. So this sees Rook, and he's kind of completing his plans for his ship, where they're going to actually finally maybe be able to leave this dying world. However, another warden comes into play that kind of maybe puts those plans to the side here. And another warden even comes into play that maybe offers him a new promise on some kind of way that he can get back off this planet. It's a lot of fun. It's Jeff Johns is doing things with all of these books, but specifically with this book, that it's just kind of like it keeps the pacing like just breakneck. I feel like he like writes a script that could be like 50 pages long and says, okay, is there any fluff in this? Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. action, 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 action. This is all what this book is. On top of that, with the quality of artwork that Jason Fabok can deliver, I feel like Jeff Johns is having a lot of fun. Offering some really interesting, really cool things for our main character Rook to go against. You want to see a giant snapping turtle get taken on by a remote control, little vehicle? Sure, why not? Because Fabok can deliver and make it really cool looking. It's awesome. I'm totally here for it. I want to see what happens with these characters. I think I'm more invested now. This felt like what I was looking for from the end of issue 1, where I was like, oh, I feel like I needed a hook. Now I got the hook, and I'm here. So you did it, Johns. You got me. Kudos to you, man. And with our runner-up pick of the week, we're going to talk about Conan the Barbarian number 11, written by Jim Zub with artwork by Roberta De La Torre. I love this book so much. And I mean, it was like I was splitting hairs between what was going to be the top comic of the week and what the runner up was. And I just kept ping ponging back and forth and back and forth. That goes to show the quality of this book. I've loved every single issue of this. And the most surprising part to me was that I looked down and I was kind of like figuring out how I was going to rank these books. And I was like, oh my God, right? Issue 11? This feels like issue 4, issue 5. That's how invested in the story I am. Each issue feels unique, and we get to see these great adventures with Conan, but each issue feels intertwined, where like all of the stories mean something, all of the character interactions, they're relevant. So it feels like there's all these overarching things that are taking place. All the while, we get really satisfying adventures each and every month. This was awesome. This sees Conan continuing his adventures with Kull in the past, and they're working their way through Atlantis, where Kull is trying to, get way to the treasure that he's seeking out. He kind of wants to be known as the ruler of Atlantis, and he needs this. All the while, there's going to be fights that need to take place, right? There's going to be hordes of monsters or hordes of enemies that they need to take on here, and Roberto De La Torre delivers on every single panel of these fights. They're brutal, they're epic, they're barbaric, as you would expect. And his artwork, and I have to keep saying this, but it feels classic and it feels new all at the same time. Everyone is going to compare this to Buscema. It's definitely a that type of approach. It's all still wholly himself as well. And I don't know, man. Like it's hard to say that this isn't my favorite drawn book every single month when it comes out. Breathtaking. It's so awesome. And when we see some of the evil manifestations that come into play, I don't want to say too much on this. Let me just say it's eerie, it's awesome, it's frightening. You should check it out. This was the runner up. Could have been top comic of the week so easily though. But with that top comic of the week, let's talk about Ultimate Black Panther number 4, written by Brian Edward Hill with artwork by Stefano Caselli. This issue sees T'Challa return to Wakanda. He's back from his adventures. He's kind of already met with Storm. He's met with Killmonger. He's back now. This feels just so cinematic. I feel like this whole week of comics has felt so cinematic. I've already made comparisons to Michael Bay and Ridley Scott, and this feels like a Jason Bourne chase scene throughout most of this issue. I don't understand how a writer like Brian Edward Hill can pace out an issue where I'm left with 5 full pages where 3 word balloons are said and I'm still invested. Most writers would sensibly put narration in there, and they would put dialogue where people were basically just talking out all the details, like I'm running after you, I'll catch up to you. It's not needed. It's senseless. This, I've said it before. I feel like he just writes and paces like he is a director of a movie, and it just shows through and through within this book. It feels just so epic in scope and so fast paced. You got to really take a second to appreciate what he's doing and what Stefano Caselli is doing with these pages, because I feel like it goes both ways. If he is pacing this out with his writing, it needs to be delivered on the artistic side as well, and Caselli is doing that masterfully. This is not just a simple 9-panel grid, if you will. The panel work he does here is really kind of inventive. It keeps the action flowing and it keeps it open enough to give it room to breathe and to keep you invested with the set pieces that are taking place. So I don't know. It's just shocking. I feel like this comic is doing things that comics sometimes really just they trip over their own feet in doing. This is delivering on something that is just so action packed in scope and so fast paced that's yeah, I don't know. I'm just taken aback by it. It's fantastic. I loved it. I'm curious, what were you thinking? So that's what I got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe if you found any benefit from this video, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking here. So thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you next week.